Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi, just being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 3 of Motherland, Fort Salem. I almost blanked on the show's name for a second. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Once again, just showing you what, magic can do. Because obviously every time we've seen the Spree do their attacks, it's been something a little different, whether it is simply making a whole bunch of people jump in a mall or making people jump off a ship. But we also, there's a whole situation near the end of last episode where it's they had people kind of go crazy and turn against each other. But this one, they froze a pool. And it doesn't seem like it's just a pool. It's the entire area. I think the curse, it starts in the pool, but it spreads from person to person. So, I think even people who were outside of the pool kind of froze. Or maybe because there were some people that weren't even touching the pool. They were touching someone, trying to pull them out of the pool. They got frozen as well. How there's people frozen underneath the water, too. I'm that's rough. And it's just I think every time we see their attacks going forward, I think they probably did variations because it's I guess it's them flexing, showing we are the Spree, we're capable of a lot of things. Because there's a lot of interesting things kind of going on at the same time. Really quickly, let's focus on Alder. For one, we get introduced to Witchfather. I was okay, so I was wondering about that. I just wasn't sure. I'm are there male witch equivalents in this world? And it seemed like there are, but I'm wondering why that's a separate thing. And so the only reason why they come together is because of Beltane. It seems like it's similar to that ritual in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, where it's kind of that thing where it's they had a whole thing where it's kind of a thing between Nicholas and Sabrina, where the girls kind of hunt the boys and stuff like that. So that's a whole deal. It seems very similar in that regard, kind of a similar ritualistic situation. But it's basically and this kind of time, it's the girls kind of feed off that energy and become more powerful to the point when they're using their powers to kind of see things that are kind of blocked off, it's channel that energy. And Tally was killing it. It's yo, how are you doing it? She's boom, 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 boom. And it's how's she doing it? It's yeah, the energy from the whole Beltane situation is take advantage of it, channel that energy, and it will make you stronger. And it's good job, because in a weird way, you could make the argument maybe because Tally is a virgin, and so she's kind of in an even more heightened state than every other girl there. That that's why her powers kind of kicked in. She went overdrive. Whereas everyone else is kind of getting a bump, she's getting a full blown multiplier boost type of thing. I don't know. Maybe that's the justification for it. Which that's interesting. But once again, what that whole deal is about, why they're separated like that, I don't know. Interestingly enough, one of the people Abigail gets with Clive, if I'm not, it's been a little while, so I might be blanking. Once again, I'm kind of terrible with names. I believe it's Thomas from The Order, which is obviously kind of another somewhat, witch show to a certain extent. There's obviously, other elements because there's also werewolves and everything. It's a whole thing. But I was hey! That was also interesting, too, because she, took the dude that Libba was talking to, and it's oh, yeah, Clive, do me a favor, bring him over here. And even, she was leaving with, I think, what's his name? Augustine or something like that. And it's as they're walking away, and Clive's almost damn. And then she's come on, Clive. And he's oh, yes. So that's a whole thing. Which we kind of dive into their issues, Libba and Abigail, because I didn't talk about it in the previous episode, but it was brought up that their moms hate each other, and so it led to them hating each other. But it's also it turns out it's a long running hate. It's generation after generation, 200 years. Because apparently there was the second Mexican war, Libba was talking about what her mother did, and then immediately Abigail's having this look her expression changes, and then she kind of goes, nah, it's time for, the Swipes had kind of told this lie for so long, it's time for a bellwether to tell the truth of, yeah, your mom helped with the storm, but I'm not your mom, but your ancestor helped with the storm, but my ancestor, she single-handedly fought back. Basically, the storm that was she summoned, ended up not only killing the enemies, but killing herself. It's that's true sacrifice. That's what a soldier would do. That's what a bellwether would do. And in that moment, she stands in front of Libba, and Libba's it seems like she wants to say something, but, I think it's a sad thing that they're perpetuating this long, do they really hate each other? Do they have a main reason to hate each other? It's no, I only hate you because my mom told me to hate you type of thing, And even, Tally's talking to the dude that she's with, because he's known, Abigail, since she was a kid, like, they've known each other for a long time, and it's like, oh, like, didn't they both kind of help? And he was like, can't they both recognize that both families helped under that search situation? Like, the fact is that it is such a, like, nah, my ancestor did the most. No, my ancestor did the most. It's like, no. Because it also, to me personally, maybe just me read too much into it, it's like, you're also discounting all the other people. It's like, you're like, my family did the most. Me. It's like, well, what about the other people who helped? Other people who were, who died, who made sacrifices? It's like, you're taking away from them a little bit because you're focusing on your family legacy. Especially because, like, the Bellwethers are, like, top tier, like, witch family and stuff like that, but it just seems like a little narcissistic to kind of pull away from the other people, but both of them are just kind of about, like, no, this is about me, our family. But even, like, Home Dude was like, yeah, but, you know, there's 200 years of, like, poison and hatred between a family, like, to the point, like, their ears don't hear it anymore. They're not willing to, like, this runs too deep for, like, either one of them to ever admit, like, oh, maybe I'm wrong, or kind of share in it. It's like, nah, it's one or the other. Your story's a lie and mine's the truth. No, your story's a lie and mine's the truth. That's a whole thing. Really quickly too, I want to point out, I thought that was such an interesting development when, like, we get, like, that flag scene where it's like, yeah, here's the generational, like, situation. And what was interesting though is when, Raelle, well, because for one, Tally puts hers out there, and then there's, like, a long list of generation of, like, her family, and then Raelle does, and hers is small. I was like, wow, that's really? I was like, that's crazy. Because I guess it's like, because usually the family will branch out because, like, you know, it's like, oh, so-and-so had a sister who had family, and so on and so forth. Like, there's expansive generation. Her family, it seems like, only goes back, like, what, 4 generations? It's her. Like, there's her, then there's, like, her mom's, and then there's, like, her mom's mom, and then, like, her mom's mom's mom. Which I'm guessing, like, are they a newer, like, witch bloodline? Because they didn't go that far back. Not less, like, some of her family, not less that's kind of insinuating, like, some of her family didn't serve. That could be what that's also insinuating. Like, that her bloodline, like, the line that's connecting to her is the only thing that served. Everyone else dodged it. Because she did talk about it, like, she comes from a family where her father was a civilian. So I guess, like, most people come from families where both sides of their family are, like, witches. And, like, for her dad to be a civilian, I don't know. Because obviously, it's not like there can't be, like, because I'm assuming it's just going to be, like, a male witch thing. It's not going to be, like, they're necessarily defining it as, like, warlocks or whatever. I don't know. But I just thought that was so interesting that they never really, that her bloodline is the way it is. Like I said, I would chalk that up to being, like, either that's the only ones who serve because that's her mom's side of the family, and because she comes from, like, maybe, like, a lot of people in her family got with civilians, hence why that is what it is. But, like, she took note of, like, yeah, like, you know, that's a byproduct of having a civilian father and stuff like that. Being, like, because the whole, like, you know, dodging, like, you know, conscription and stuff like that, and being drafted and stuff, like, it's really fascinating learning little by little kind of more about this world and how everything operates. But I guess that also supposed to insinuate, like, maybe her family doesn't have a long line because, like, some of her family never had multiple kids. It seems like her mom, like, what had a sibling, at least the way it branched out to, like, branched out to the side. So it looks like, but even that sibling may not have had any family or kids, or once again, no one signed up. So, like, Tally's kind of the last of her bloodline. It seems like Raelle maybe too, at the very least when it comes to the witch side of things. Like I said, that could be just not including, like, the generation of, like, oh, like, it's definitely probably not including her father's side of things because her father probably has no witches. So it's like, it's only focusing on her mother's side of things, which that bloodline is very thin, I guess, at this point. So maybe Raelle's in a very similar situation to Tally, but in a even worse situation because it's like, you know, she's the last of her witch bloodline, but at least, like, Raelle has other family, like, beyond just her. I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting, and it's actually kind of sad looking at that. So I thought that was interesting how, like, you know, because obviously that whole thing, like, plays into, like, that's part of the intro of, like, showing the family lines. It's interesting because you looking at it, at least from the intro, just like when I'm pausing on it, it seemed like her bloodline, like, runs a little deeper than what it does. But maybe there's more to that. Like I said, I don't know. So, an interesting thing too, obviously we have Alder, like, showing up at the Hague because we have a meeting of the different nations. So I know one of those dudes there. I was like, is that the actor who plays Tag? 'Cause I was like, that actor looks so familiar. Is that Tag from Superman and Lois? I don't know if it is, if I'm being crazy or not. That looked like that was him with just like shorter hair. I couldn't tell. That looked like it was the same actor, not unless I'm mistaken. Yeah, regardless, it was like interesting, like, oh yeah, these are the different nations, and obviously it seems like, once again, I want to know Sarah's circumstances. Is like, because she's like an OG witch, so like obviously one of the generals there doesn't like her. It's like, oh man, like, oh, you act like you're running things here, but the fact of the matter is, like, maybe it's time for a change in leadership. So it seemed like she was kind of suggesting herself, but I'm like, you would think, I guess it's because like you've been kind of running things long enough and you've never ever taken like a real quote unquote leadership role, even though you want to make it seem like you are. It's like, no, we're kind of all here together. It's kind of almost like a democracy in a sense, because like, no one has more power than the other. It's just, we're all nations coming together speaking about circumstances. So, because obviously it's about handling the spree, because obviously the whole Kiev situation, it's like, oh, things didn't kind of go that way, so we need to have, go more, like, find more methods, because they're suggesting going after one, that person was suggesting going after one particular, that general was kind of talking about, because I'm assuming everyone there is, I don't know anything about military rankings, but I'm assuming since they're all there, they're all generals from their respective countries. But one of the generals kind of saying, like, she wants to go after one particular cell because she's like, yeah, like 200 some people died, like 91 are injured, like it was like the most excruciating things, like to die the most terrible death, so it's like, we want to go after this one particular cell. We need to take them down one cell at a time, because that's something that came up in the first episode I talk about, that there is no actual true leadership at the spree. It's more like an ideology, and there's basically different sects, different cells, like, like a terrorist group. Like some groups do have, like, just using real world applications, do have leadership, but in this particular case, it seems like it's like each one acts independently, which is what makes it harder to track them down, because it's not one particular like head of the snake you're going after necessarily. I mean, maybe there kind of is, and they're just still unaware of the inner workings of the spree, but it seems like the spree just kind of act independently of the cells of one each other. But it seems like it's still such a precise and like controlled like attacks that make you think like there's got to be some hierarchy, there's got to be some structure to the command situation. But nevertheless, but obviously it's like, Sarah's saying like, we don't need to kind of do anything rash. I understand we will make movements, the government's going to make movements, but the fact of the matter is we can't like act too rashly, because we're just going to leave ourselves open to more attacks and stuff. Obviously, the general from Russia talks about, like, they're on the border, but they share with China. There's some people with, like, specific seeds, that being kind of, like, the voice and stuff. And I think it's so interesting, like, the fact that Sarah was like, oh, like, she felt it, she knew it in her blood. I was like, is that supposed to insinuate, like, that's actually, like, whoever is a part of this is, like, whatever seeds she was hearing were from, someone that's actually related to her? Because I was about to say, like, we know, like, she lost at least one sister, so I was like, could this be like a different, like same, they're from the same bloodline, like that's why it resonated with her. She was like, I felt it in my blood. But essentially, those people are being kind of like Russia. The dude's like, yeah, I would want to respect their wishes and leave them alone, but China, and then like one of the other general interrupts, is like, yeah, but China's not here to speak for themselves. And I'm like, why is that? Like, did they do something bad and kind of got themselves kicked out of, like, these conversations? Or do they go, like, now we're going to do our own thing because they didn't like the way, like, this group, like, this, everyone came together and, didn't like how they represented it. But obviously, there's conversations about, like, right, we got to go to find these particular people and bring them into the fold, because these are people who don't want to be militarized, which is so interesting, because it seems like Adler kind of has a perspective. I guess because they're specifically nomadic people, maybe it's a little different, like, because it seems like that's what's so confusing, because it seems like you're willing to let them go, but then it was like, one of the generals was like, no, but you're saying for us not to go after them so you can get to them yourself. Because I was about to say, like in the U.S., you're like kind of pushing people to kind of like, so why would you kind of be okay with these people kind of not wanting to get militarized? So that was kind of confusing to me, but maybe they're kind of implying like, oh, because you don't want any other country to get them, you want to have them for yourself, so that's why you're saying leave them be. But maybe Sarah has like certain perspectives on it. Once again, if because we do know that we did hear the conversation that it is a legality thing of like dodging the draft and stuff like that. And then, I mean, once again, that's real world wise. I mean, it hasn't come up because I've been 18 for like 10 years, but I know I remember learning that in like my freshman year of high school. Like, oh yeah, the draft and stuff like that. You kind of have to sign up, or you could actually kind of go to jail if you kind of refuse to sign up and everything. So I haven't looked into it, so I don't know the rules for that. Like now, because that's come up recently in a conversation of something I was watching. I was like, oh yeah, I haven't thought about that. I remember being at the DMV and being like, oh, do you want to sign up for the draft? I was like, what? It was almost kind of like a why even ask if it's kind of like legally a mandatory thing if I didn't want to go to jail. It's a whole thing. I'm not to get into that. I'm not trying to criticize anything. It was just like an experience I had where I was like, oh, kind of what's the point of asking me? I guess it's kind of like it has to be your decision, but it's almost like it's either this or jail. Like, you know, maybe once again, I haven't been 18 in 10 years, so I don't know what the rules are on that. So it's just interesting, you know, once again, the parallels between real life and kind of like the structure of this world, you know, it's fascinating. Once again, I'm not trying to throw shade at anyone. It's just me talking about my personal experience and just kind of what I know. And once again, I'm still kind of ignorant on the subject. So I'm sure there's a lot more people who are well versed on the subject. But regardless, tangent and all that aside, I'm just so I find it Adler's position. I said Adler again. Alder. I'm just going to go by Sarah. I just need to start because I'm going to always confuse myself with Adler and Alder. I'm just going Sarah. Sarah, like, her positioning on it is just kind of interesting, like, and the other generals calling her out. But obviously this episode was called, like, A Biddy's Life, and I was like, okay, like, the people that were following her, I kept wondering, like, what's that all about? What's that all about? And it's like, oh, so basically they're her source of why she stays young, because one of them starts kind of passing out, and in that moment she starts aging. So I was like, okay, so you need a constant supply of people around you to basically, like, her group of what 6 or 7, she needs them to kind of, like, she basically draws upon their magic and their life force, and they become like a hive mind. So they're connected life force wise. So the moment one of them falls, she starts aging. Because I was like, because I was wondering like why you're the only one that hadn't aged, and it seems like, I mean, from what we know, it seems like she's the only one that does it. I'm like, how does she get that special treatment and no one else does? Maybe it's like a specialty only she has. But obviously we also saw that young girl, Devin, getting chosen. And she's like, oh my God, like, it's an honor. Because even Tally was talking about it, which even Rael was kind of like, oh, that's kind of weird and creepy. But like, Tally's like, no, they should be revered and everything because, it's such an, it's not a sacrifice. It's such an honor. Once again, Tally's all about that. Like, she's super patriotic. And obviously it's like, I don't know. Like I said, Rael's just kind of got her own issues with Sarah and the way she handles things. Like, it hasn't come up because they haven't been in a scene together. Because only one amongst them that's interacted with Sarah at all was Abigail. So, like, if Rael and her get in a scene together, I'm curious, like, what will end up coming up. Who knows? But, like, and by that, I mean, they've been in the same scenes. They've just never had, like, a legit true interaction, like a one-on-one in that regard. But and she referred to one of them as her daughter. I wonder, is that just because it's like, how like, which is like, oh, we're sisters and everything, and you were kind of like a daughter to me? Or is it kind of like you actually were my daughter, like, because I've lived for a long time, I've actually had multiple daughters, and so like you are one of them and you chose to become one of my biddies. So, which, yeah, it feels weird to say that. Just because what biddies can mean, it's so weird for me to say that, because, I think that's a slang term, like biddies, like, that just, like, because regardless, it messes with my head a little bit saying that, but, the fact is that, like, because at the moment she, like, after she died, she turned young, I was like, wait, what? I was like, is that just how, like, she saw her, but then they cut back to her, she's still young? I was like, wait. And then Devin touched her, I'm like, is she gonna? And she, like, rapidly ages. Like, okay, so that's how that works. So each one of them is actually super young. Like, whatever age they really are when they die, they revert back to it, because, like, their entire life force is getting drawn into her, so whatever life they would have led. Which is almost, like, borderline some, like, in a weird way, it kind of reminds me of, the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who. How they it's not the same operation of, like, how they do their thing, but it seems interesting because basically they teleport you. If you're unaware, like the Weeping Angels, when they touch you, they teleport you to a random point in time. You'll live out the rest of your life and die. It's a very weird way that they kill you, but whatever life you lived, like say you're going to live for 50 years, like that life force goes to them. And so you'll live out your life normally and whatever time they drop you off, but obviously you will eventually die and they gain your life force that way. It's a weird, interesting way to like go about like sustaining, like it's an interesting way that species of creatures in that universe ends up like living, but it kind of reminds me of that a little bit in that regard, because it's like, yeah, she's taking the life that you would have lived. So you still like, I mean, I don't know if it's a thing of like, right, like say like you're 18, I don't know whether like Devin in that instant like aged to like 70, and so that, God, I don't feel like doing the math. The 52 years, because I actually had to pause to do the math because it was going to drive me crazy if I didn't do it. Like, I wonder, is that what that is? It's like she automatically gets those 52 years right there. I'm refreshed and everything. And Devin immediately aged to 70 years old. I'm wondering, is that how that works? I don't know. Once again, but when you die, you revert back to the age you actually are. So say like you are able to stay around for like 10 extra years, and say like she turns 28. Her real age is 28, that when she dies, she's 28, or does she die and turn back to the age she is now, say like she's 18, she goes back to being 18 when she dies. It's a whole thing. Which is also interesting too, because it shows that like, I guess at any given time, like the magic at Fort Salem, it's like she keeps it going. I guess that's why she's like top dog, because like with all this constant energy flowing through her, she's able to kind of make that place prosper. And like the moment like one of her, like one cog in the machine is down, like it ripples, because like, oh yeah, the fruit dried up and everything. And it's like, it's just fascinating to kind of learn like, oh, that's how Sarah's whole circumstance works. So that was a really, really interesting side of things in the episode. But another interesting aspect is like, obviously because of this whole Beltane thing, like we meet Scylla's ex, Porter. Now this brought up something I've been wondering for a little bit, and I should have brought it up in the previous episode reviews, but the faces that Scylla chooses, they're not just like random faces. Like it's like, oh, I just constructed his face. It's like, no, these are the faces of real people. I think what that's kind of, that whole Porter situation is indicating, like, because what ended up happening is, like, he kind of gets on Rio's case, but then, like, apologizes. It's like, I'm sorry, like, but me and her, it's like, wait, she didn't tell you anything about her life and stuff like that? It's like, yeah, like, kind of stay away from her if you don't want to get hurt, like, because she's going to run, basically. Well, it kind of Scylla kind of explains herself later on and says, like, Porter, like, and my families were dodgers. Like, you know, we avoided, you know, we moved from place to place because we were dodging, the draft and stuff, like the conscription and everything. So, but she was like, I decided to join because I was all about, let's stick it to them. Like you know, my family, like basically they were only going to get arrested because it is illegal, but things went sideways and her family ended up dying. I think that is a true story. I think that's how she got involved with the spree, or maybe, because I was wondering like if Scylla was her real name. It's like, now I know it's not. Whoever she really is, Scylla is the identity show. Because that's why I was like, how is it that you have such an airtight, like, I was like, you guys must have deep connections. It's like, no, it's easy to have an airtight identity where you basically steal someone's face. I'm curious, it's a situation where it's like, because when Porter talks to her later on, he's like, yeah, this doesn't make sense for you to be all about this, you know, signing up and, you know, saying the oath and everything, because when I talk to you and I know you, you were saying a lot of stuff that could have led to you using a balloon, kind of implying like you were saying some very spree level stuff. So I'm thinking she did probably like start rolling with the spree, but maybe it's like, okay, my sacrifice is necessary for this. So she got killed or whatever, and whoever this is pretending to be Scylla took her face in her identity. So, because I was about to say, like, how else would this person know so much about Scylla? Because if she really was Scylla, it's like I don't know. Because I was about to say, like, not less when Porter met her, this person had this face too. So not less it's been a lie even with the Porter thing, but I'm under the impression like there is a real Scylla and she's most likely dead and she took her face, because that's probably how that spell works. It needs to like, God, there was something recently that did that. I don't remember. Oh, what was it? There was something where it's like you need not just a debris situation, like because there's kind of a similar thing. They were kind of setting up a debris, but it was like something else where it's like you need someone alive to be taking their identity. Oh, Lovecraft Country. Like, they did a similar thing in that regard, so I'm wondering, is that how that works? Like, you need a person to be alive, or at least you need their body in some shape or form to be able to take their form. Like, that was a whole thing, like, taking somebody's form. So I was wondering, like, does it kind of work like that, where it's like the real Celia somewhere else, and like her body's in like a comatose state where it's like she can just apply that, or she just dead, and it's just like, oh, now there's no way like anyone can accidentally run into the real Celia. I'm wearing her face. I don't know how that whole thing works, but I would assume she has to have known the real Celia to know all that background that like Porter's bringing up, knowing who Porter is and everything. Not unless it's when you take someone's identity, you have like the spell makes it so you know all that they know, so she knew who Porter was. But then that also makes me go, not unless she was wearing this face, pretending to be like Scylla as an entirety is a fake identity. Maybe it really was a person and she took her identity, but she had the whole thing with Porter because maybe she was trying to recruit him, but it didn't work out and now she's doing this. So maybe, I don't know, it could go and flow either way. At the end of the day, she ain't about him and ended up kind of using her powers to make him kill himself, because it's like, you're making Raelle doubt me and I need her to be all about me. I can't have you poisoning her mind as I'm trying to warp her mind and try to get her on our side. Once again, why she's specifically trying to get Raelle and no one else, like why they specifically are targeting her, I don't know. Because she even told Raelle, like, don't worry, like, if I do run, I'm going to take you with me. And it's like, I don't think she's saying that just like out of like, because I care so much about you. It's like, no, because you're part of her mission, whatever that is. So that's interesting. The sad thing is Raelle tried to save him in the last second. I think for him, he was trying to tell her something, but obviously she's using her power and she was trying to like take it on herself. She took on some of it, but it wasn't enough to save Porter, and she ends up kind of passing out from it. And then just as she's kind of passing out, she sees Scylla nearby. I hope that doesn't get misconstrued into a situation of like, oh, you killed him because you're the jealous girlfriend and you're killing the ex to get him out of the way so they don't get back together. I hope it doesn't get twisted like that. Like, she was legitimately screaming for help, and she was trying to save him, but it didn't work out. It probably would have been super bad if she did, because her whole thing is about taking on that person's pain. That's another ability I just can't remember. Once again, it's just like, there's something like that where it's like someone could take someone's pain, but it does a lot to them. I don't remember what that was. It's a specific show and I can't remember what it is. It's something where it's like, yeah, you can take a person's pain, but it takes its toll on you. Like, it kind of poisons you in the same vein. I, for the life of me, can't remember what it is, but I remember that. I feel like it was from a TV show, and I can't remember. I'm going to have to do some research about that, because I cannot, for the life of me, remember what TV show it is. But I remember specifically a character being able to do something similar, where like all they can do is take your pain away. Was kind of like their main thing, but it led to them like suffering in the process. Could it be? I was about to say, was it Midnight Texas? Was it Lim? Because he can steal, well, his thing is energy, like he steals life force and stuff like that. But I was like, could it also be used to take people's pain away? Was it him? I don't think it was. I'm blanking. If I can remember, I'll try and include it in the comments down below if I remember, if I end up doing some research and finding out. But regardless, this makes the Scylla thing even more crazy of like, okay, so, like I said, which side is it? Is it that she's always been this fake Scylla, even when she knew Porter, or did she take Scylla's identity, like sometime after the whole Porter thing, and now because she took her face and identity, she knows all that she knew? I don't know. It's a lot of interesting things that went down this episode. There's also, obviously, oh, God, I'm blinking. Tally and Home Dude, them getting close. Because I think, obviously for her, it's like, right, she had talked about it in episode 1. She grew up in a place where, like, there were no dudes. So for her, it's like, can I trust you? Because I guess she's never been this vulnerable with someone of the opposite sex before. So we'll see whether, because for him it's like, nah, like neither one of us is supposed to just mingle with one person, but I've spent all day with you, so like how I feel about you is how I really feel about you. Because she was wondering like, I get it, you're supposed to get close to me because of Beltane and everything, but like, am I misconstruing this, or is there something like deeper to this? So we'll see how that all turns out. I'm really interested to see like where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.